Okay, so we're going to begin this evening with a public hearing. And the purpose of the public hearing is to provide an opportunity for the public to provide input and comments regarding the community needs. The City of Urbana is working to draft the annual action plan for fiscal year 2023-2024. The annual action plan outlines the goals and budget for activities in fiscal year 2023-2024. So the notice of this public hearing was emailed to the media, emailed to various social service agencies and citizens, and placed on the City of Urbana's website on October 17th, 2022. I now declare this public hearing open. If anyone desires to express their views regarding the proposed amendment to the annual action plan, please come forward and be recognized. Written comments are also welcome. I think now we should do the roll for the public hearing.
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Green?
Here.
Commissioner Freeman?
Present.
Commissioner Silvas?
Here.
Commissioner Diana?
Here.
Commissioner Williams?
Here.
So we have a quorum. Thank you. Seeing as how there is no one in the audience, did we get any emailed contributions to the public hearing?
We did not receive any email contributions.
Thank you, Braden. So I now declare the public hearing adjourned, and we will move on to the commission meeting. So can you call roll for the commission meeting, please?
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Green?
Here.
Commissioner Freeman?
Present.
Commissioner Silvas?
Here.
Commissioner Diana?
Here.
Commissioner Williams?
Here.
Thank you, Braden. We have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of our previous meeting, which was held September 27th. You got a copy of those minutes in your packet. Is there a motion for approval?
I move to approve, and thanks for the awesome minutes.
Thank you, Patty.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you, Bob. There's a motion and a second. Is there a discussion on the minutes from September 27th? Corrections, discussions, comments?
Congratulations on another really thorough set of minutes.
Thanks, Patty. Hearing no discussion, is there, I'll call for the motion. Do you want that by, no, okay. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it, and we have approved the minutes from September 27th. Are there any additions to our agenda for this evening?
We don't have any additions to the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Braden. And was there any public input for the meeting this evening that you received via email?
We did not receive any public input for this meeting.
Okay, thank you. So that leads us to staff report.
Good evening, everyone. I'll have a quick slide presentation, so that's why I'm down here. Before I move into that, though, I wanted to remind the commission that we are moving to a new email system, so if you haven't already set up your new city email address, please do that. That way we can more effectively communicate with commissioners, and we'll be setting up an email group so that we can more easily communicate information. All of your commission packets and information will go to that email address. So if you set it up and you're having issues or you're not receiving information from us, please let us know. But just as a reminder to get those set up. And if you need assistance, please reach out to me. We can work with IT if anyone needs help with that. The other thing I wanted to add to the staff report today that wasn't in the packet, you might have seen in the News Gazette, there was an article published about a balance of community development block grant funding that the Community Development Department currently has. It's a fairly sizable balance of CDBG funding, and the reason we have such a big balance remaining is mostly due to COVID. During COVID, some of the traditional programs that we sponsored with that money had to be postponed or temporarily suspended. But then in addition, we received a large a large allocation of CDBG funding that was specifically to be targeted toward COVID projects. So for example, the city's rental assistance program was paid out of that funding. So we were able to spend down that money really quickly, you know, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as of today, we have spent all of our COVID CDBG money, which is a great accomplishment. But because we were kind of prioritizing that pot of funding, it left sort of this other pot of traditional CDBG funding to the side, which we, you know, are now trying to get committed to projects and trying to get that money out the door into the community. The reason this came up was because that funding balance will be subject to a HUD timeliness check. So every year HUD wants to make sure that their communities are getting the money out the door, they're not sitting on it, they're, you know, being responsive to the community needs and getting funding committed to projects and actually spent. So in the spring, we will have a timeliness test, and our current balance is too high. So we do know we need to get that money out the door, you know, within the next 5 to 6 months. And so I just wanted to update all of you on that because it was in the News Gazette, and I just wanted to make you aware. We currently do have several projects in the pipeline to commit that funding. So we're pretty optimistic about our ability to get that money committed and spent in a timely fashion. We are still kind of waiting on final numbers for what that balance actually is. We can approximate about how much it is, but we just submitted our consolidated annual performance evaluation and review to HUD back in September. That's a big report that HUD requires us to submit every year. The acronym is CAPER. And that's kind of our progress report. So that was submitted in September, and once HUD kind of finalizes that report, then we'll get more solid numbers as to what the balance actually is. But we do know there's a balance. We are working on getting that funding committed. And, you know, like I said, we'll have a better idea about what the balance is once HUD has, you know, reviewed our CAPER, approved it, and gotten that all sorted out. But I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. Are there any questions about that process?
Yeah, so does that mean the projects that are in the pipeline will eventually come to us for approval?
Yes, yep, like, every CDBG or home project that we want to propose has to come before all of you for review, for approval, and then you either, you know, send it to City Council or, you know, tell us to go back to the drawing board. But yes, any projects that we want to pursue with that CDBG funding will come to all of you. So you'll definitely be hearing more about this. Like I said, we have some projects in the pipeline that we're excited about, so you'll be hearing more about that in the near future. Any other questions? All right. So the only other thing I wanted to discuss today on the staff report is an exciting new grant program that it's been a quick process, a quick turnaround. So the city of Urbana, in cooperation with the city of Champaign, met really back mid-September. Both cities had some pots of HUD funding that we wanted to kind of put together to address some of the important housing and homelessness needs in our community. We recognize that sometimes it can be a little bit of a barrier for local agencies, local nonprofits to have to chase down a lot of different funding sources. You know, Urbana has some, Champaign has some, and we realized it can make things complicated. So what we decided to do was come together, kind of pool our money, and we put together this consolidated application, which will be, I'll go into more detail in a minute, but it'll essentially be one grant application for all of these funds. So whether an agency is doing work in Champaign or Urbana, they'll be able to kind of go to one place to apply for that funding. So I'll go into more detail. This has been a really quick process, and so this is the first time it's coming to all of you. You're not voting on anything tonight. This is just an update. We had to kind of move quickly because we're partnering with Champaign, and so we kind of had to manage, you know, their timeline, our timeline, and we wanted to make sure we could get grant agreements executed as quickly as possible, again, to get this money out the door and get this money to agencies that need it. So we're hoping to do that quickly. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. So again, this is a consolidated application and scoring process that will be jointly administered by both cities. And the total pool of funding is over $5 million. And the focus area will be for agencies that provide affordable housing, homelessness prevention, or other related supportive services in the community. We will be utilizing our online Neighborly Grant Management Portal for all applicants. They will be submitting their grant applications through this portal. They'll be able to, manage their applications through this portal. And going paperless has just made it a lot easier for staff and also for applicants manage this whole process. So here's the timeline. Again, quick turnaround. We are going to be opening the application period on Friday, November 4th, which I just realized is next week. So it's, again, very, very quick.
That's why I looked at that and I said,
yes. So as you see here, we're giving as much time as possible for that application period. We want to make sure that we're able to move quickly, but also give agencies enough time to prepare their applications and to, just go through a thorough process. So applications will be open until, you can see there, December 12th. We will be holding 2 informational sessions for interested applicants. One on Friday, November 4th. That session will be taking place in Champaign City Council chambers. And then we'll be holding a second informational session closer to the end of the process on November 28th, and that will be held at the Urbana Free Library. And information about both of those sessions will be, sent out through social media, through email, and hopefully through the media as well, just so that any agency, any nonprofit in the community that wants to apply has an opportunity to come and to learn about the process, about the grant funding, and how to apply. Again, as I mentioned, you see there, the applications will close on December 12th. And then again, quick turnaround. The week of December 12th, so the 13th through the 16th, staff from both Urbana and Champaign will be meeting to evaluate the applications, to score them, and to determine funding allocations. So one kind of important thing to clarify is that while the application and scoring process for these grants are going to be jointly administered, at the end of the process, Urbana will have a set group of applicants that it will be funding, and then Champaign will have theirs. So once all the applications are scored and ranked, the 2 cities will kind of go their separate ways. So all of the proposals that Urbana intends to fund will come before you at our December meeting for recommendation and approval. And again, at that point, we will kind of separate from Champaign's process, and they will be managing their grantees, and we'll be managing them separately. So our goal is on Monday, January 17th, to have City Council to present the recommendations that you've approved to City Council, and then for Urbana to finally approve them on February 6th. And you can see there, Champaign at that point will have a little bit of a different deadline, just because their process takes a little bit longer. I think they are hoping to have their grant agreements finally executed February or March of 2023. Here's more information about those sessions that I mentioned. So Friday, November 4th, 10 to 11:30 a.m. In Champaign City Council chambers, and then Monday, November 28th, 12:30 to 1:30 at the Urbana Free Library Lewis Auditorium. These sessions will also be live streamed, and people will be able to watch on TV if they're unable to attend, and they can submit questions virtually or via email if they're unable to attend in person. So here's a breakdown of the different pots of funding. So I hope you can see that okay on your screens. So as I mentioned at the start, both cities realized we had kind of a lot of different pots of money, and we didn't want it to be a burden or a barrier to agencies to have to go out and apply for 5 different grant programs. We really wanted to consolidate it, make it easier for everyone who provides these services to apply kind of in a one-stop shop. So essentially, agencies will apply for what they need, and then staff, the staff review committee on the back end will determine which is the most appropriate pot of funding for that program. So again, trying to minimize any confusion or, we don't want agencies to have to get into the weeds determining which pot of funding is the best for their program. We wanted to make it an easier lift for them. But you can see here, these are the different pots. So you see, I'll start with the Champaign. Champaign General Funds is committing $2.2 million. Champaign has an allocation of Community Development Block Grant, CDBG funding, $175,000. And then you see the Urbana portions. The Urbana Home Consortium money, we're committing $285,000. Also, the home ARP allocation that we received from HUD, which you were all involved in the allocation planning process. It was presented to you, the plan that RPC helped us with. We're kind of throwing that pot of money in there as well. So that was $2.6 million of home ARP money going into this project. And then Urbana, it's not secured yet, but Urbana is going to be submitting a proposal to include $500,000 of the city's ARPA that we got from Treasury into this as well. So that $500,000 hasn't been secured yet, but we're hoping to be able to add that there. So again, the total is, I think it comes out to like 5.6 million at this time. In sort of total funding. So these are the eligible project or program types that can be funded through this program. So you can see here, these projects all have to target either low to moderate income residents or individuals who are experiencing homelessness, and I'll go into that more in a minute. But you can see here the different eligible program types. You have supportive services. That is a very broad term. Supportive services can include case management, housing navigation, counseling, things like that, for agencies that provide services to individuals who are homeless or who are at risk of experiencing homelessness. Housing navigation, tenant-based rental assistance, affordable housing development, and then rehabilitation or development of non-congregate homeless shelter, and then housing gaps as well, which is another kind of broad term, but again, a lot of different types of projects can fit in that category. And then again, as I mentioned, the eligible populations here. So we want to target chronically homeless, which is individuals who have a long history of being homeless. And then you see some different, kind of a breakdown of the definition of homeless. So literally homeless meaning someone who's living on the street or living in a facility that's not meant for human habitation. Someone who's at imminent risk of homelessness, or an individual or household that is fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. So again, throughout the application process, we will be looking for applications that target these populations, or as I mentioned, low to moderate income residents as well. So as I mentioned earlier, Champaign and Urbana staff will be jointly scoring all the applications that we get. And these are some of the criteria that we will be looking at. So again, we want to make sure that the proposals are responsive to council goals, both for the city of Urbana and the city of Champaign. Both of our councils have outlined, how they want funding to be spent in the community, what their priorities are. So we want to make sure that proposals are addressing those goals. We'll also be looking for capacity and relevant experience. We want to make sure that agencies are prepared to take on, the projects that they're applying for, and so that'll be a criteria we're looking at. Commitment to collaboration. We want to see that agencies are working with, other agencies throughout the community to, maximize their project impact. That's a really important part of this. Project readiness. This is more for, as you saw on the other slide, affordable housing development is an eligible project type. So what that would mean is like building an actual structure or facility for affordable housing. So project readiness meaning, can this project proceed within, a reasonable time frame. We don't want to dedicate money to something that's 5 years away. We want to make sure it can actually happen quickly. And then we want to see that applicants have clearly defined goals and accomplishments, and that they are addressing gaps in the community, specifically housing gaps, or affordable housing gaps, or gaps in services, again, that target individuals or households that are experiencing homelessness or are low income. So that's the process up until now. So as I said, next week the portal will be launching, and we'll be opening up applications. Again, we know it's pretty quick turnaround, so we wanted to keep all of you updated on that process. As I mentioned earlier, any proposals that Urbana staff want to fund will have to come before all of you, and you will have a chance to review them, provide any feedback that you have, and then ultimately we'll be asking for an approval vote to send to City Council. So this is not the last you'll be hearing of this. You'll be presented with those as well. So that's all I have for the slideshow. If anyone has any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer them.
I have one. December the 12th is your deadline before it comes to us on December probably the 16th, or if we come later, it will be just before the Holy Christmas week. And last year, we had an issue about timing when we were going to meet. So we really need to look at if it's on that Thursday and then we meet the following Tuesday, do we have enough turnaround time for us to review, to read, to take, and to vote?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sheila and I did talk about this. So I think we did this last year as well. We held a special meeting because the fourth Tuesday in December is always not good. Right. People aren't in town, which is understandable. So our plan is to hold a special meeting, and I believe this is accurate, on the 20th of December, which then if we look at the timeline here, so we would have the proposals to you in your packet prior to the 20th, and we would also provide a detailed summary of the applications received, so you have kind of a distilled summary of what we're proposing, but that they will be included in your packet for that special meeting on the 20th. And again, we realize December is always tricky, but we don't want to have to push it until January, just because we hope to actually get the agreements executed in January.
I just know right now I won't be available. I'll be out of town that whole week. So
all right.
Just make sure you count for numbers, unless you're going to do it virtually. I don't know.
Out there. Okay. We'll continue to discuss that internally, and then make sure we let you all know. Again, we know that it's a little bit of a tricky timeline, but we'll see what we can do to just help facilitate people's schedules.
Thank you so much.
December is a crazy month.
I have a question. So there's only certain organizations that are eligible to apply. So, the processing on the Neighborly portal includes that, not just random people can do this, but there's like eligible organizations, and I'm assuming that all the stuff they have to upload is consistent with the scoring criteria. Yes,
and so in the training sessions and the informational sessions, we'll be going over that in more detail, and we will be also releasing a detailed instructional packet. It's not quite prepared yet, but it'll be like a companion document to the application, so people can read through that as they're applying, and it'll give them that detail. But that is correct. Public or private nonprofits, agencies that provide these services are eligible to apply. That's correct. So we will be providing more of that specific guidance when the portal launches. Kind of getting to the question about workload. How many do you think there's not going to be hundreds of proposals, right? There's going to be maybe 15 or something. It's hard to say. Yeah. So I can't give you a number. We're optimistic, and we're really hoping to get some really high quality proposals. So it's a great pot of money. We feel like it can definitely make an impact. But I'm not quite sure what to anticipate at this stage.
And when you give us stuff to look at, is this going to be everything that was sent in, or are you going to score it, and you're only going to give us the top 10% or half or whatever, or are you going to give us everything? Or maybe you don't know yet because you have to see what it looks like.
I think in the past, with the youth services grants or the, you know, the consolidated social service funding prior to the youth services grant that you all used to look at, I believe we would bring to you the ones we are recommending for approval. We do typically include in our memo to you kind of an overview of this is how many we received in total, you know, these were the types of proposals we got, you know, these are the ones we are specifically recommending, and then this is why.
Okay.
So I don't, you know, I don't necessarily know if we'll go into detail for all the proposals that
Right.
we've received, but I do know in the past when we've not recommended any funding, we have provided an explanation as to why, just so that it's clear.
No, I think it's really great that you guys do that triage, and that's
Yeah.
helpful for us, for sure. Thank you.
A couple of questions. One, with regard to the sourcing of these funds, since they're coming from different places, I mean, obviously Champagne's general fund source has no strings attached to it, but some of the things, especially from Urbana, where this money is coming from, or was originally, are there any strings attached as to how it can be used, where it can be used, that still carry over into this?
Yes, so that's a good point. And that's kind of built into the program and why we didn't want the agencies to have to think through that themselves. We want to put that on staff because we work with these programs more, so we know
Right.
more of, you know, what those strings are. So when we receive proposals, what we'll do is determine, okay, based on this proposal, based on what this agency is proposing to do and kind of how they have things set up, which pot of money is the most appropriate. So there are some project types that will only be able to be funded out of the Champaign general funds. And if we want to recommend those for approval, those would then go to Champaign. So again, we'll be kind of parsing out which ones are going to Urbana, which ones are going to Champaign,
So there
again,
will be
based
some
on.
crossover on that. as we're doing
Absolutely.
that.
I will say, so for the home ARP funding, there are some kind of unique strings to that, again, because that was through the Treasury, specifically to target certain populations. So again, yes, those requirements
Right.
might differ from the Champaign CDBG or the other Urbana home money that's reflected there. But again, staff will kind of be working all that out on the back end so that the agency doesn't need to really even think, which one am I eligible
Okay.
for?
And then the other question, you mentioned that the council or the councils have different priorities for
Yes.
the
I concur
process.
with that.
Are those priorities that can be shared as to what the council priorities are?
Yeah, well, there is a lot of crossover. So for example, and I don't want to speak for Champaign because I don't work there, so I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, but for example, I think like housing and homelessness is included in both as well. So there is a lot of crossover in the application material that, as I mentioned earlier, that we'll be sending out with, when we open the portal, it'll outline all of those.
Okay.
So agencies will be able to see, okay, these are Champagnes, these are Urbanas, and then they'll be able to know where theirs fit. So again, there is some overlap, but as I mentioned, if there's one that, for example, meets an Urbana goal, but that goal is not a Champaign goal, well, then we could maybe consider shifting that proposal over to the Urbana side and saying, okay, well, Urbana's going to fund this one because it more directly meets an Urbana goal rather than Champaign. So we'll be able to work through all of that.
Thank you.
I have one more. I'm somewhat, help me to understand it in my short thinking here. If I'm a grant writer, I want to know specifically which grant pool of money I'm drawing from so I can cater my grant to make sure I fit the criteria. So if I don't know that, it's as if I'm throwing a dart in the middle of the pool and then not knowing that if I had worded it differently, I would have landed.
That's a good question. So in the materials that we will post once we
Right.
open the application, there will be very specific criteria. And we've built that criteria broad enough so that it will apply to all of these different pools of money. So if an applicant is following the criteria, is following the application as it's structured, and is, and that information is all kind of matching up, they will be eligible for a pot of money. You know, so I don't have that concern. Again, we structured the application so that it is inclusive of all of these different programs. More of what staff is going to be doing is deciding on the back end, oh, which one does this fit better into? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then the question is, then, at the end of the day, it's about readiness. It's whether or not that agency or that group meet all the criteria and they can get it going in a short amount of time.
Yeah, readiness is important. Again,
Because other pieces for me are back-end stuff in the agency itself. And what you're looking at, once that application is in front of you, that as an agency, I'm done all that Sitzenleben stuff. And now I'm saying I can really get something going immediately or within a short order.
yeah,
Okay.
that's definitely a factor. You know, we also will be looking at in the application, okay, is this agency, you know, are they able to demonstrate that they're, you know, collaborating with other people? Are we able to show that they are really addressing a gap in the community? Are they really demonstrating that they have maybe run this program before? So again, just trying to get a sense of, and the specific scoring tool will also be made public, so you will all be able to see that, and every applicant will have access to that during the application process, and then during the informational sessions, we'll be walking them through that as well, because it will very clearly show how staff will be evaluating their application. So again, we want to see, you know, who do you have, what staff do you have to work on this? You know, have you ever worked with this population before? Have you ever run a case management for homeless individuals? Different questions like that will factor in as well. But it's a very detailed and thorough scoring tool, so it'll really help us kind of determine maybe who's the most appropriate to receive funding.
I'm just my last question. This is me thinking through that if an agency lacks in certain area, but they can get that up in short order, will staff be there to say, in your application may be deficient in these areas, if you can redress it or not?
Yeah, well, so I think my answer to that would be the way the scoring tool is built. I mean,
Okay.
none of these criteria are going to be, oh, you don't have X, therefore we're completely just axing. I mean,
Right.
there are a couple of things. So for example, the project has to be for an eligible project type.
Sure.
It has to be for an eligible population. So those kind of bigger things, like if we get an application for something completely unrelated, that would be an example of, well, this just
Sure.
straight out the gate is not eligible. However, these other criteria that you see here, each of these items will have a score associated with it. So, you know, an agency might score a little bit lower in capacity, but they might be ready to go tomorrow, and so they'll score higher. So it'll all be, you know, again, kind of scored and weighted. So I would say that other than those really big picture eligibility categories, none of these criteria are going to be like automatically discarded or ineligible, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just making sure because it's such a short turnaround. And not we as Urbana, but Champaign County has the best reputation as far as getting information correct and out there. And even though we do, but the perception may not be the reality. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
and thank you for that question, because I reminded me of something else I want to let all of you know of. So again, that was one of the reasons for the 2 informational sessions, one right at the beginning of the process, but then also one closer to the end of the process, so that as someone's applying, if they're getting to the end and think, oh no, I have all these questions, they can come back and say, hey, I have all these questions. Some other things we will be doing is we will be hosting a joint website where we will be posting any question that comes in, we will have a designated email address for this program. And again, all of this will be made public when we launch it. But so there'll be a dedicated email address. So any agency or any person that has questions, they'll send it, and then we will weekly update like an FAQ document on the website so that everyone, it's kind of like crowdsourcing basically. So
got you.
anyone can log onto the website, see all the frequently asked questions with the answers, obviously. And then, you know, of course, my contact information, Sheila's contact information, all of staff's contact information at Champaign will be made public as well, so that we can be receptive to any questions that people have. But we think the joint email account will really help so that it automatically gets forwarded to us, so that we know that we can reply to it, and then any answers that we give will get posted publicly so that anyone can see the answer to that question. Because a lot of times people have the same questions. So just making it easier so there's a one-stop shop for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Maybe Mr. Freeman asked this question and I missed it. But if someone was to start the process and for whatever reason we determined that, you know, they weren't fit or didn't have whatever, you know, necessary, you know, information that they needed, are they subject to that deadline, or because they initiated their, you know, application prior to, would they be able to, you know, still kind of be in that pot
Yeah.
per se?
So they will also have to be subject to that deadline. And that's, it's tough because again, we do realize as I just mentioned, you know, it's a quick turnaround. We want to be as helpful as possible to agencies that are trying to, you know, to get stuff prepared. But just with a lot of the HUD regulations, I mean, that everyone has to have the same deadline. So it is a requirement that it's submitted by that deadline on the 12th. You know, if people reach out ahead of time, you know, we'll work with them as quickly as possible to, you know, get what they need, get everything in order. But when it comes to that deadline, that is a hard deadline for the applicants.
Yeah, I would really make that clear. It's the application deadline.
Yes.
This is.
Yeah.
Yeah, just following up for a second on what Commissioner Freeman was talking about there. I do understand with regard to tailoring grants, and that's very hard to do in this sort of a timeline, so that you guys are kind of doing the tailoring, rather than tailoring the application, it's tailoring the funding more on the back end, which is understandable. The only caution I would give out is that that's a process that works better if you get $5.6 million worth of applications for $5.8 million worth of grants. If you get $12 million worth of applications, that could be a problem, because then you're kind of forced to pick winners and losers in some people's mind who think they could have done better if they had known what to apply for.
Well, and that's a good point. One thing I will say about that is, and this will be made clear in the application and in the informational sessions, it is most likely, and it tends to be very likely, especially with these type of grant programs, that you will not receive the amount you're requesting. You know, it's very common to get a reduced amount, and that is actually built into the application. We ask applicants to you know, to clarify, okay, well, if your program is funded at 75%, how would that change your services if we were to fund it at 50%, you know? So we are trying to kind of build that in so that people are aware that, you know, you're absolutely right. You put out something for $1, you get $5. That's just how it goes, and we understand that. And so just making it clear that the funds are, I mean, you know, again, over $5 million sounds like a lot, but for these type of programs, it might not stretch as far as you think. So we are trying to build that in and make people aware that we really want to see that we can stretch this money as far as possible.
Right.
And so really helping them think through, you know, how can you leverage any other funds? How can you, again, I think that's why collaboration is very important, so that we can see that people are working together to, again, stretch that dollar as far as they can. But yes, and that'll be something that we will reinforce as well in the informational sessions, just so that people know that, you know, if you ask for 12 million, you know, probably not. You're not going to get 12 million.
Well, my other question would be kind of how is this going to be promoted? being that this informational meeting is in 3 days, this may be the only secret project in the history of Champaign County, because I don't know if anybody heard anything about it so far, you know?
Yeah, great question. So we've developed a variety of promotional materials, flyers, logos. You know, we're going to be doing a full media blitz. We will also be, what we found to be most effective in the past with kind of outreach is, I mean, I think we talked about this at last month's meeting, is going to existing groups in the community that already meet regularly. So we already have some presentations on the books, you know, to go to service providers, to meet agencies where they already meet and say, hey, we have this opportunity. So we do have some of those meetings on the books already. But then again, also media, email, social media, things of that nature.
Between now and December 12th will disappear
Absolutely, yes.
just
Yeah.
so fast,
Mhm.
yeah. Good.
Braden, you may have mentioned this, but I missed it. What's the time frame? You mentioned it will be around $5 million, but what's the time frame for spending that?
So the time frames, just to clarify, are HUD. I mean, so when HUD gives you money, they say you need to spend it by this date. I don't want to give any inaccurate information, so I can provide that to the commission. I believe for the home ARP funding, it's 2030, which is not so that would mean we would have until 2030 to spend this money. Again, I can send that. The other pots of money might have different deadlines, but
Okay, so
I know for that
multi-year.
home ARP, they did say HUD said it had to be spent by 2030.
Okay, so it's a multi-year.
Yeah, and that's what, again, we're hoping for, again, big projects that will have that lasting impact, so absolutely.
In the past, these homelessness programs, I think, have been by the county. Was a county-level consortium, and I see this is Champaign and Urbana as cities. So what was your thinking about creating the consortium, both cities but not the county?
Yeah, so actually and again, this is a little confusing, but the Urbana Home Consortium is involved. So home funding, whenever you see home funding on anything, that pot is consortium-wide.
Okay.
So that goes for the home ARP funding, that goes for the regular home funding that's involved. So projects can serve anywhere in the county. Again, if it's a project that just serves Champaign, well, then that might be better suited for that Champaign General Fund. But you can see there, it's really 3 entities, but I was referring to Champaign and Urbana because those are the 2 agencies that will be actually managing grants agreements. But yes, it'll be consortium-wide, which includes the whole county.
Okay, then that makes sense. That's the way it's been in the past. And then there are some agencies that serve Champaign and Urbana and other places, so how will those be divvied up in terms of where they go? If there's one agency that's serving, I mean, I know if they're serving homeless, they don't have a Champaign or Urbana residence, but the services might be provided in Champaign or Urbana or the county, so how's that going to be sorted out?
That's a good question that I don't have an answer for right now. It'll really depend on what types of proposals we get, and as we look through them, it'll be a kind of a proposal by proposal basis, what we think is most appropriate for that specific proposal. So I can't say right now, but that will be something that the committee will think through as we're kind of deciding where things go.
Any other questions for Braden?
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. This was a lot of information, and it's exciting. I assume the innovation, what's the innovation referring to?
So we want proposals to be responsive to current needs, and again, I think it's the terminology is to kind of give the idea that we're looking for solutions to these problems that we haven't solved yet. So just trying to think innovatively. Again, we think a consolidated application process is already kind of an innovation. this partnership with Champaign has been really wonderful, and so that's in and of itself kind of an innovation. But we're really hoping that agencies are able to, you know, submit proposals for programs that, again, because this is kind of a unique pot of funding, can maybe think creatively or in a new way about what programs they can support. So,
Thank you.
I think innovation in this sort of a context would be the kind of thing that continues to provide a benefit even when the funds are used up. So often these things are just one-shot things, yeah.
Thank you, Braden.
thank you.
Are there other pieces of the staff report, or was that the staff?
No, that was
That's
all.
the staff report. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is any unfinished business. Is there unfinished business before the commission?
No, there is no
No
unfinished
unfinished business. Any new business?
Not at this time.
Okay. So that brings us to the end of our agenda, and seeing as there's nothing else on our agenda, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.